thank you all for being here and for all that you and we do for Mickaboo. And I want to talk a little bit about enrichment and agency and kind of give an overview on some of the cool stuff that we've been involved in. And, you know, this is obviously something that is driven by our work with Mickaboo, and Beth and I have been volunteering with Mickaboo since 2015 when we found Mickaboo. And the basic, you know, ensuring that our birds have safe, loving, caring environments for life and education is so core to what we do. And in the past little more than a year, we discovered a group called Parrot Kindergarten. Now, this isn't a formal Mickaboo endorsement. This is just me talking about how my birds and Beth and I got to where we are and giving credit where credit is very much due. Parrot Kindergarten, they also have a Facebook site, and they're doing some really wonderfully cutting edge stuff on parrot enrichment and communication. And it's been such a life changer for our flock that I really like sharing it whenever I can. And that's me. I'm just a happy volunteer and having fun with an amazing journey with our birds. That is, in fact, me in the corner reading a book with Molly. Molly loves to be read to, and we'll talk about reading to parrots and those sorts of things in a little bit. The founder of Parrot Kindergarten is Jen Kunha, and she's, I just wanted to give a shout out and again, give credit where credit is due. These are not, you know, I'm not a genius. I didn't think up this stuff. I am just sharing stuff that has been very powerful for us. And I provide a gray disclaimer. A lot of people, and even Mickaboo people, think, well, African grays are the smartest, so of course they're going to be able to do this stuff. And our birds are grays, so a lot of our pictures are of grays. But in fact, the Parrot Kindergarten group has got all sorts of parrots, all different species, different families, cockatoos and macaws. I think that the bird who is advancing the fastest that I've ever seen is a parrotlet. Little bitty bird, big brain. How do they do it? I don't know. So we'll get started. And I originally put this presentation together for an event that Mickaboo was participating in that was a non-parrot audience. So there are a couple of things that I've sort of borrowed from our basic bird class that I'll zip through because you all know those things. But the basic idea that parrots are diverse and they are very social and very long-lived and very intelligent. And they are prey animals. And all of these things fit together in terms of how we interact with our birds and how we can enrich our lives. Long-lived, there are more than 300 different species, not breeds, of parrots, whereas a Chihuahua and a Great Dane and a Mastiff and a Bulldog are all one species, Canis familiaris, just different breeds. So parrots, in terms of their diversity, are equivalent to the mammalian group primates, which includes lemurs and chimpanzees and spider monkeys and gorillas and us. Or carnivores, which includes weasels and bears and dogs and lions. And they can live a long time, which we all know, but the bigger species, you know, can live 80 to 100 years, and even little budgies can live 20 years with proper care. So we have a big responsibility. And they're social learners. They learn from their parents, they learn from other flock members, and they have big brains. So they need lots to keep them occupied. They need safe toys, they need safe activities. Foraging is wonderful. They need lots of social interaction because they are not solitary animals by nature. They live in flocks, and you and I are their artificial flock. And an important point is that parrot flocks are not typically hierarchical. There may be some exceptions in the wild, but in general, they are not. They're pretty flat. So activities are negotiated, not done through dominance and submission. And this is also important when we go to work with our birds. There is no alpha parrot. They're social learners, as I mentioned, and their personalities change over time, and they have very strong, very unique, and kind of like us, changing wants and desires. What's your favorite food? Well, tonight it might be sushi, but tomorrow, day before Thanksgiving, it's probably turkey. And like us, they will surprise us with what they want at a particular time. And because of these things, training is really great for your parrot's well-being and happiness and your relationship with them, because it brings together social interaction and learning and activating their very prodigious minds. So it's a big win. You'll notice this picture. There are probably pictures throughout of birds playing with tablets and playing children's games on tablets. They can absolutely do this. We'll talk about it more in a little bit. This is a slide almost directly taken from the basic bird class, which is that parrots as prey animals are vigilant, cautious, easily startled, and easily frightened. Anything that we do that frightens them or makes us seem like a predator diminishes trust. Anything that we do to build trust helps our relationship with them. And so punishment is a really bad strategy for learning in general, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides, but it's particularly bad with prey animals because it teaches them that you are to be feared and not trusted. And that's not a good platform for learning. Anything that we do that frightens them depletes our trust bank. And trust bank is a phrase that I'm borrowing from a really wonderful trainer named Cassie Molina. And that is that in any relationship, trust has to be earned. You start with some level of trust that might be none, might be a lot. If your best friend introduces you to someone and says, this is a great person, you might start off with a fair bit of trust. If someone approaches you on the street and asks you if you'd like to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, you might start with zero trust. But the more that in that relationship you do where you are true to your word, where you are respectful, where you are not frightening, where you don't do things that have a bad outcome, you build trust. And when you do things that are frightening or perhaps have a bad outcome, you make a withdrawal from that trust bank. Now, if you've built up enough trust, you can make that withdrawal without too much problem. I will say that when we had to evacuate from the fires, it wasn't a case of I will ask politely and wait until you're ready to step up. We had to towel 2 of the birds. That's a big withdrawal from the trust bank. But we had lots and lots and lots of deposits to put in that made that an okay thing. This slide picture to me says a lot about the trust bank. Here's Lou. I'm reading him a book. You'll notice that Lou is on my leg. Lou is a Mickaboo rescue. He was very, very sick and near death when he was surrendered to an avian vet, and he was absolutely terrified of men. And For a long time in training, I had to give Lou his treat via a bucket so that he wouldn't bite me while taking the treat out of my hand. After a number of years, I was reading to Lou, and he was standing on a table, which is what he would do when I would read to him, and he stepped onto my leg. And that was, to me, the direct result of 4 years of just making as many deposits into the trust bank as I could and as few withdrawals. And his trust built up to the point where, yeah, okay, I feel safe getting on your leg. That was a huge moment and continues to be a huge moment. So hopefully this makes sense as I talk about the trust bank and things that we want to do. And sometimes, as I said, we have to make those withdrawals, but we want to make sure that our deposits, just like in our financial life, our deposits are greater than our withdrawals. So what I'd like to do now, and by the way, if you have questions, please interrupt, put your questions in chat, and either Sarah or Pam will interrupt me. They love to interrupt me because they know that I'll just go on and on. And yeah, put that in. So consider this to be kind of a brief survey course on training ideas and terminology, with the opportunity to see some really cute pictures of birds, like Cookie enjoying a fuchsia blossom. Okay. You know, in training, there's a phrase, tell them what you're going to say, and then say it, and then tell them what you said. And so this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to talk about positive reinforcement training, which is about rewards and redirection and never, ever about punishment. I'll talk a little bit about clicker training and the broader idea behind it, which is, you know, clicker training gets bandied about like it's a magic thing. It's not a magic thing. It is a very specific technique that's very useful in positive reinforcement-based training. Clicker isn't a magic wand, and there's lots of things that we can do, whether or not you like to use a clicker. I'm going to talk about rewards and motivation. And a phrase, again, that I'll steal from trainer Cassie Molina is, are they doing it because they have to or because they want to? And the more we can get our birds, and for that matter, other people in our lives, doing things because they want to rather than because they have to, it's a win for us. I'll touch briefly on an approach to behavior analysis, talk a little bit about target training and discrimination training and preference training. Target training, touching a specific object. Discrimination training, identifying two different things, which is which. Preference training, which is favorite. And get to teaching yes and no. And obviously, I'm going to be going over all of this at a pretty high level. All of these are things that you may want to look into in more detail, but this at least gives you some ideas of things that you might want to look at. And then we'll conclude with tablets and comm boards and reading. So before I go into all of that, I want to talk about agency. And by agency, I mean the ability to take action, be self-directed, choose what action to take. And this gives us a sense that we have some choice and some control in our lives. And even though, as I'll use the term pet owners because it goes with this idea that I'm trying to get across, we feel like we're kind of the benevolent dictators in our animals' lives. And, you know, we decide that mealtime will be at this time, and this is what will be fed, et cetera, et cetera. There are places where we can give our animals some agency in their lives And the more we can give them agency, especially more intelligent animals like parrots, the happier they are. Just like, just like you or me. If I'm at work and my boss tells me exactly how to do each thing that I'm supposed to do, yeah, I can do that. But assuming that I don't need that kind of direct intervention, I'm not going to feel real happy about it. I'd prefer, and I like personally to work in situations where my boss says, here's the thing I need done. Go get it done. You figure it out. I'm much happier with that. I have a say about what happens in my life. And this style of working with birds is a way to establish some agency. So the first thing I'll talk about is behavior analysis and what's called the ABCs. And it's obviously a really easy acronym to remember. It's the ABCs. We learned the ABCs when we were little. A is the antecedent. What happens right before a behavior? What was the situation and what immediately preceded it? The behavior is, what did they do? And we can look at this from the other angle too. What did you do? And C is the consequence. What happened because or immediately after the behavior? This is a great way to look at behaviors that you either want to change or behaviors that you want to see more of, because the antecedent and the consequence are two things that set up and reinforce the behavior. I'm going to jump to the bottom. Fred bit me because he was angry that I'd been playing with my other birds. Okay, we have the behavior, Fred bit me, but I'm completely hypothesizing about the antecedent. He was angry. Well, angry is a label. And now I'm giving a reason that I think he was angry. So I've given him a label, and I'm speculating as to why that is. Now, it may be accurate, but it may not be accurate. Fred might have bit me because he was close to his favorite toy and I was reaching in a way that looked like I was going to take it away. Fred might have bit me for any one of a number of reasons. So it's really critical to be observant and use objective, descriptive language rather than labeling or guessing. So the antecedent here, after playing with my other birds, I walked over to Fred's cage. He was perched in back of his cage. So that's the general antecedent. That's sort of the scene. And the immediate antecedent is I put my hand in his cage and asked him to step up. Now we know what's happening when Fred bit me. Fred bit me because he was angry. Did he fly over and bite me? I don't know. I put my hand in his cage and asked him to step up. The behavior is Fred bit me. And the consequence is that I yelped and pulled my hand out of Fred's cage. So now I have a lot more information about this behavior and what was happening around it. Does Fred bite me every time I ask him to step up, or only when he's in his cage, or only when he's in the back of his cage? What other times does he bite me? Can I change the antecedent, or can I change the consequence? And I can think about that for myself as well, where the behavior is, the antecedent is Fred is standing in the back of his cage. I want him to step up. The behavior is I put my hand out to Fred at the back of his cage to step up. And the consequence is that he bit me. And so I can think about my behavior and how to change it as well. If you look up the ABCs of behavior, there's a lot of good information about this. Obviously, this is a very quick review, but it's incredibly helpful. And I encourage you to just experiment with it. If you see a behavior that you either like or don't like, write down or say what the antecedent was, what the behavior was, and what the consequence was. And if you have someone in your family that you can do this with, do it together so that you can point out, oh, gee, that seems like a label. I don't understand what you mean when you said Fred is hormonal. What did you see? What did it look like? Labels are a problem because they're very easy to misunderstand and they're very easy to put a lot of baggage into. Hormonal is a convenient label for a bunch of behaviors. But when I say hormonal, you might imagine hormonal means that Fred tries to regurgitate every time he steps up. And Sarah might mean Fred gets territorial around his cage and gets nippy. Both of those fall under the jurisdiction of hormonal, but they're very, very different behaviors. Okay, so the ABCs, well worth looking at more. Positive reinforcement is core to everything we do. This is, something we talk about in the basic bird class and in general. I'm going to briefly go through the quadrants of training, reinforcement, and punishment. It's not really that important that you understand all of them, because the one that we're really concerned with is positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement means you do something and you get something you want because you did it. You get a gold star, you get a treat, you get scritches. You did something, you get something that you like. Now that's assuming you like treats or scritches or gold stars. Negative reinforcement, most of us would call some kind of punishment, but in a behavioral sense, it is negative reinforcement. You do it to stop something that you don't want. And like a horrible classic example of this is there's an electric shock going through the screen that you're standing on, and you have to press a button to stop the shock. It's a terrible way to learn, and it often creates a condition called learned helplessness, which is something we want to avoid. The idea that you feel like you can't really do anything to get out of a bad situation. And then punishment is positive. Positive punishment doesn't mean good punishment. It means, again, you get something. Positive in this case, you get something. Negative, something is taken away. Positive punishment, something you don't want is done to you. You're hit, you're yelled at. And negative punishment, something you want is taken away. You're grounded. We take away your cell phone, something like that. All of the latter work based on fear, and fear is a terrible motivator. And in particular, we want our learners to want to try new things. Fear is really bad about that, because what fear is setting up is I don't want to do the wrong thing, not I want to do the right thing. Positive reinforcement is just an incredibly effective way to go. And with this has become clearer and clearer as we work with species where we really can't punish them. If birds can fly away, they'll fly away. You can't really punish a killer whale very effectively, but you can get them to learn amazing things based on positive reinforcement. Now, the next term we'll talk about is bridging, and this is where clicker training comes in. So positive reinforcement, you do something quote unquote right, you do the desired behavior, you get something you like, whether that's a treat or scritches or praise. The problem is, well, the good thing is that we're very good at repeating behaviors that have consequences we like, right? If I give my wife flowers and I get a wonderful kiss, I'm probably going to bring her flowers more often. If I bring her flowers and she barely looks up from reading the newspaper, I might not bring flowers that often. The problem is that it can be difficult to pinpoint the behavior we want and link it to a reward because it takes time to provide that reward. And so if I want my parrot to touch a tablet and I give them a treat when they touch the tablet, by the time I'm giving them the treat, they're several seconds away from having touched the tablet and are doing something else. Maybe they turn their head to look at me. In fact, they probably do turn their head toward me as I'm giving them the treat. Well, now what were they being rewarded for? Were they being rewarded for turning their head toward me? I've just taught my bird to turn his head toward me. So we want something that marks at the moment, bing, this is the thing that you did. And have the bird associate that bing, whatever we use to mark that, means a treat is coming. That was the thing, a treat is coming. But just so you know what you did, bing, that was the thing. And that's called bridging, something that can be done immediately, and sounds are a good one for that, and becomes associated with that's it, treat is coming. So some people use a clicker. I might even have a clicker close at hand, or I might not. Looks like I don't. But basically, it's something that you press and it goes click, kind of loudly. The nice thing about it is it's not a sound that you're likely to make in other situations. So it winds up only getting associated with that was the behavior I wanted, and there's a treat coming. There's a lot of material on clicker training. A great starter book is a book with a memorable title. It's called Don't Shoot the Dog by Karen Pryor. It's a great book. It's also quite a few years old now. There's tons of material on YouTube about clicker training. I don't use clickers. I use the word good because it's awkward for me to be balancing the clicker in one hand, treats in the other, the bird on another. I only have two hands. Pam's showing a clicker. That's a big old clicker. There are much smaller ones as well. But you can use any sound. It's very natural for me to say good. And so good is the bridge that I use. And nothing wrong with using a word, so long as you keep it relatively distinct and your trainee knows that that means that was what I wanted and a reward is coming. So one way to start with clicker training is a very useful thing called target training. Here we see a cockatiel who is reaching out to touch the end of a stick. Let's see, yes, good, the pen is visible. It's hard sometimes with a virtual background to get non-human things to appear. So learning to touch the end of a stick-like object, touch, click. And in fact, you start just moving toward it a little bit. Click, treat, click, treat. Now I won't click here, I'll wait, because if I don't click here, they're gonna go a little closer maybe. Click and treat, until we reach the point, touch, click, treat, big treat. It is useful, this is a great thing that we picked up from Parrot Kindergarten, to have two levels of treat. A small treat. In fact, I'm going to take a moment to digress about treats. A small treat, which is like, yeah, I like that. And a bigger treat, which is bingo, jackpot, you know, free cherries. The coins are just coming out and coming out. Big reinforcement. And you use that latter one for big steps forward and the smaller one for small steps going toward it. Training in this way can be very treat-centric. And if it is, we need to be mindful about our birds' diet in general so that we're not overloading them on high fat or high sweetness foods. That's one thing. The other thing is that the size of the treat should be small, because if it takes me a full minute to chew up my treat, I'm likely, especially in the beginning of learning a new behavior, I'm likely to have forgotten what the heck it was that I did. And so we're back at the beginning. Whereas if I do a behavior, click, get a treat, munch the treat, have a chance to repeat the behavior, I can get in a lot more reps in a shorter period of time. If you're starting with a target stick and you want to keep money in your trust bank, which I recommend, you don't bring the stick to the bird because the bird is likely to move away from the stick. They'll just move right off screen like my hand did. So you want the bird to be in a place where they can go forward or back, and you bring the stick close enough that your bird isn't going away from it. And as they move toward it, when they move toward it, give them a click. If you have to, hold the treat near it so that they will come toward it. As they come toward it, click, here's your treat. Click, here's your treat. Gradually move the treat back until they touch the stick. But do it
we have a
at
question
their
along
pace.
those lines.
Uh-huh.
The question is, my son Conyer doesn't really touch the target, but grabs it. Should I try to correct that?
I would. And because it's useful to have them just touch and not grab. Grab is a great first start. So now they are making contact with the stick. What we've done with our birds is say, gentle touch. And then, again, before they get the chance, like, to actually grab and bite, but as they move toward it, or just as their beak make contact, click then. And if they do grab it, don't reward, just say gentle. And as they start to let go, then you can try reinforcing. So that they get the idea that grabbing it isn't quite the behavior I want. And then the idea is shaping. So the more they get closer to the behavior they want, I reinforce that, move them closer and closer till they're just touching it. It's definitely something that you can work with. And I think that it's worth working with because grabbing the stick is grabby. It can lead to other stuff. Another thing that, in terms of refining target stick stuff, is reinforcing them for just touching the tip rather than grabbing the whatever this part of the stick is, the middle of the stick. Because if I want to teach them to touch something else, I want them to go to the tip of the stick and not grab the middle of the stick. I want their attention to go to the tip. So we use some red food coloring to put a little bit of color at the end of the stick, and then the tip is more easily identifiable. So target training is great. One, it's a basic behavior and it's easy to train in phases to get the bird to approach the stick and then touch the stick. Builds a lot of trust. And it's really helpful. Oh, I need my bird who doesn't like to go in his cage to go inside. I can use the target stick to lead them there. I can get them to touch other things. And for those of you who like to teach tricks, target training is really important for things like basketball, or, carry the ring over to and put it on the pole. All of those kinds of tricks start with target training. And Sarah's comment here, I have a conjurer's learned to gentle tap on my finger. She became grabby and more than a gentle touch over, moved from grabby to a gentle touch, but it took weeks. Yes, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. And fortunately, we have time. So target training is a great place to start. And much of what we did before we found Parrot Kindergarten, we were doing target training in various ways and using it to do, tricks. Turn around, spin vertically around the perch, come over here, come over there. And our birds had a good time with that. Then as we discovered Parrot Kindergarten, we learned a couple of other things. And two of those things that are incredibly powerful are discrimination training. Discrimination meaning these two things are different, which one is which? And we started that with colors. So this is red, touch red. What a wonderful illustration of touch red right there. And regarding the conjurer, yes, we have birds who wanted to grab the red and had to learn to just gentle touch. So this is red, touch red, touch red, touch red, touch red, treat, touch red, treat, touch red, treat. This is blue, touch blue, treat, touch blue, treat, touch blue, treat. This is red, touch red, treat. Now, this is red, sorry, this is red, this is blue. I really should have brought in my color things, but I did not. But which is red? If they touch red, treat. If they touch blue, no, this is red, touch red. And then if they don't get it, we go back to a few more rounds of touch red, touch red, touch blue, till we can get to which is red, which is blue. With all of this stuff, we really want to get to about a 75% accuracy rate, right? 3 out of 4 is good. We don't have to drill this over and over again, trying for 100%, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that our birds are probably ready to move on. But once we get now, this is red, this is blue, I can introduce another color. This is green. I can show you green and red, green and blue, right? Yellow. So now our birds know colors. And I can hold up a book and say, touch the blue butterfly. Now, whether or not we know what butterflies are, if there's one object on the page that is blue, that's where they're going to touch. And so we can now start talking about butterflies. This blue is a butterfly. There are all sorts of things that you can do discrimination training with. Colors, shapes. Touch the square, touch the triangle, touch the circle. Sizes, big, little. Different objects, right? This is a card. This is a stick. Which is the stick? And we can do matching. This is red and this is red. They're the same. They're a match. This is red and this is blue. They're different. They are not a match. Guess what? Once your bird can do matching, you could play a card game like Go Fish with them. Here's a 3. Here's a 5. Are they the same? No. Now, when we play Go Fish with our birds, and I'm glad winter is here because it's more of a rainy day activity for us, they get a treat whether or not it's a match so long as they identify, right? You don't have to have a pair of 3s. If you can say that this 3 and this 5 are different, that's a win. Now that we get and this can happen in parallel, but we've got the idea that we're comparing two different things, it's very easy to say which is favorite. I have a nice way to do this is with 2 treats. Here's a seed, here's a nut, which is favorite? you'll find your bird is probably consistent most of the time, and sometimes they might surprise you. But treats are a great way to go with which is favorite. You can also use this to say, I just got 2 new toys. Which is favorite? Which one do you want me to put in your house? Oh, now we're getting to agency. Which is favorite? I'm going to make chop. What should go in the chop? Should I use kale or chard? Which one? And you can start involving your birds in some decisions like that. This is pretty cool stuff. Someone asked, do I use non-colored shapes when I move to color to shape and size discrimination? We do not. I suppose you could, but in addition to saying this is a triangle, now I can say this is a blue triangle and this is a green circle. So we're focusing on triangle and circle. We're recognizing that they're colors. And yes, they're totally capable of putting multiple attributes together so that if I have 2 triangles and one's green and one's blue, I can say which is the blue triangle. I can have a blue and green triangle and a blue circle and say which is the blue triangle. And they will get it. Yeah. So discrimination, which is which, and preference training, which is favorite, lead to teaching yes and no. And the picture here, this was something really cool that Molly, one of our grays, and I get to do for Mickaboo, is that we teach bird classes to school groups and sometimes summer camp groups. And, you know, the tricky thing in doing that is to get across, on the one hand, how amazing and special and smart birds are without getting a bunch of kids to go, I really want to get a parrot because they can play computer games. So that's the challenge. But in this case, and this was a wonderful thing. This was something we tried for the first time. And this was 2 things for the first time because it was in a public setting. I wanted to see Molly likes to be read to. I wanted to see if she would allow herself to be read to by someone other than me. And I was able to use yes and no cards to ask her if she wanted to read a book while we were doing this presentation, and if it was okay if this volunteer read the book. And she was very happy with that. Now, later, someone asked if they could pet Molly, and I said that she wouldn't like that. And they said, well, why don't you ask her? And I thought, that's a very valid experimental thing to do. Molly, would you like the children to pet you? Yes or no? Bing, no. No, I don't want to be petted. The other thing that's happening in this picture at this point, and this is one of the cases where Molly and birds just completely blew my mind. Like children, Molly and our other birds have favorite books. And their favorites vary from time to time, but they have pretty much like a top 5. And this book called My Big Dog is one of them. And I found that I could ask Molly questions about the plot, about things that are going to happen. Can a dog and a cat, does the cat want to be friends with the dog? Yes or no? Can a dog and a cat be friends? Yes or no? And, you know, she's absorbed the plot enough to be able to answer questions like that. I think that's really, really remarkable. Okay, so teaching.
Jonathan, we have a question. And the question is this similar to the training given to Alex by Dr. Pepperberg at the University of
Chicago? So Beth and I were just talking about this. The discrimination training is very similar to the work done with Alex by Dr. Pepperberg. And Alex was groundbreaking in demonstrating the ability to identify things like shapes and colors, and to stack the concept of color onto the concept of shape, so that he could say, give me you could say, which is the green triangle, and he would select that. The stuff that Jen Kunha has been doing, and she just got, she's an attorney, and she was just offered and accepted a research position at, oh, I forget the name of the university now. This just happened this week. But it really goes beyond the work that was done with Alex, to things like recognizing and associating letters and words, word recognition, associating letters and being able to use symbolic language like letters and words, the tablet work, and this yes and no is the starting place. To my knowledge, I've never read anything with Alex doing yes and no kind of work. I think that it just wasn't in the schema that the researchers were thinking about at the time.
Okay. Additional questions coming from our audience. Can a ringneck learn all this too? I think you addressed this earlier.
I did. Yes, absolutely. Ringnecks can learn this. Every parrot species, there are, I say every, I can't really say every, because there are 300 parrot species. I haven't seen them all. But I will say again, the bird who I've seen making the fastest progress is a parrotlet. And I've seen a couple of parrotlets do really well. Tiny, tiny bird with, somehow this huge brain. So yes, absolutely, ringnecks can do this. Amazons are doing this. Macaws are doing this. Conures and cockatoos and budgies and more cockatoos are doing this.
Yeah. Another question. This is someone that might have asked it on Facebook. It says, I've never had a dog, but I understand that some dog breeds see play as a treat in and of itself, like border collies. And other dog breeds are motivated more through food than through play. The question then, with that as background, is likewise, are some bird breeds more motivated through play than through treats, while vice versa might be true of other bird breeds, or are all bird breeds motivated through pretty much the same thing?
Okay, great question. And I will reiterate that with birds, we're talking about different species, not different breeds. The difference between an Amazon and an African gray is more like the difference between a dog and a bear than the difference between a Chihuahua and a poodle. So that's just an interesting kind of cool, geeky biology thing. Some birds are very motivated by things like scritches. Some are not. And different birds are motivated by, even if they're treat motivated, they're motivated by different treats. A lot of birds love pine nuts. Pine nuts are a great treat in terms of their size. None of our birds care for pine nuts. Wish they did sometimes, but they don't. So yes, for some birds, scritches is a great reinforcer. Play is a really broad term. And I think that my experience, my assessment is that training with birds is in itself a form of play. But I can see situations where a favorite toy or a favorite game would be a reinforcer. So not always treats, but treats are a big winner in a lot of cases.
And a further clarification question from me, Jonathan. Would you say that it's the differentiation, play, treats, etc., isn't necessarily at the species level, but actually more at the individual bird level?
Absolutely. Absolutely true. And just as I said, birds' preferences, an individual bird's preference will change. So, for example, Molly loves reading and doesn't care for the tablet that much most of the time. But every so often I'll ask Molly, would you like to read a book? And she'll say no. And I say, do you want to play on the tablet? And she says yes. Or the first time that Lou, who loved playing on the tablet, said he would rather read a book. Wow. Okay. You know, so yes, they change, and yes, it is at an individual level. We've
Just
got
like
about,
people. They're just
yes,
like people.
yeah. We've got about 5 minutes, and I really want to talk about yes and no training and then very briefly go through the last things. Thing about yes and no is that it's a two-level association, right? When I ask which treat is favorite, you're choosing directly between two treats. But when we use yes and no, we have a symbol that goes with a sound, yes or no. And then there's the meaning that that symbol points to. So initially we used, because we'd done color discrimination, we used pipe cleaners, green for red, green for yes, red for no. Because it's easy for us humans to remember, we're used to red stop, green go. And then because our birds liked, because grabbing the pipe cleaner and playing with it was such a strong reinforcer for birds that it was distracting from selecting yes or no. So we went to cards that had yes and no printed on. So the first thing that we do is just associate the card with the sound. This is yes, touch yes. This is yes, touch yes. This is no, touch no. This is no, touch no. And then we do our discrimination training. Which is yes, touch yes. Which is no, touch no. So that they are pretty consistently going to yes when you ask them to touch yes, and no when you ask them to touch no. Now, at this point, we haven't cared at all about the meaning. Yes and no are just two different values, two different identifiers that they are discriminating between. Then comes the association with meaning. And the easy way to do that is, do you want this? Yes or no? Now, yes is very easy to teach because you give them something that you're pretty darn sure that they want, like a favorite treat. Do you want a nut? Yes or no? Yes. Yes, I want a nut. And so you associate that, yes, do you want this? Yes means I do want it. That's the first thing. No, I don't want it. That's a little trickier because we want to use something that we're pretty sure they don't want, but not something that they really, really don't want, right? We don't want it to be something scary. So a glass of water is generally a good neutral no. That is to say, they've had access to water in their bowl all day. And probably at that particular moment, no, they don't really want water. Do you want water? No. Do you want water? No. Do you want water? No. Okay, now, do you want water? Yes or no? No. Okay. Do you want a nut? Yes. Do you want water? No. And then we can expand this into other situations. I'll tell a very brief story. And I will say that when I started, I always had yes in my right hand and no in my left hand, because I was kind of afraid that maybe they were doing it from position. They didn't really get it. And I stopped that because it's really underestimating them. And they totally know they can use them in either hand. You know, it's not that rigid. But with Molly, we were doing yes and no pretty early. Now, it should be noted that Molly loves sunflower seeds, is kind of likes apples, is kind of meh on pistachios, and absolutely adores blueberries and dislikes bananas. So I offered her a seed. Would you like a seed? Yes. Would you like a piece of apple? Yes. Would you like a pistachio? No. Would you like a blueberry? Yes. Now I only had one blueberry and I was just going through my stuff. So then I said, would you like a seed? No. Huh, maybe she's not getting it. Try again. Would you like a seed? No. Would you like a piece of apple? No. Uh-oh, maybe she's not getting it. And then the light bulb came on and I went to the refrigerator and I got another blueberry. Would you like a blueberry? Yes. She absolutely got it. And once she'd had that blueberry, she did not want the other treats. She was holding out for a blueberry. So she totally got it and it cracked me up. Patricia, yes, that's a good point. Treat response may be limited. And in those cases, we have to do something else that is an incentive. Scritching is a great one. And for some birds, that works really well. I'm going to say that the ability to say yes or no opens up a whole world of possibilities. We built an aviary. Do you want to go out in the aviary? Yes or no? Cookie suddenly started saying no. Oh, we moved a trash can into the middle of the floor. Is the trash can scary? Yes. Should we move the trash can? Yes, we moved the trash can. Do you want to go into the aviary? Yes. Wow, okay. Since we're coming up on really the end of our time, in fact, we're already there, I will just say that reading and children's board books are a great activity to do with your bird, to introduce concepts, build time, and do identification. Where's the man? Where's the bird? Where's the dinosaur? Touch the red bird, touch the yellow bird. And in fact, this is a parrotlet who absolutely loved books about dinosaurs. And technology, tablets. We do a lot of work with tablets, including COM-boards. COM-boards are a tool that were developed for autistic humans to be able to express their needs. I'm not going to get into it now because we have a minute, but they open up the ability to ask for things and to make statements and to play games like music games or painting games. The thing about COM-boards is that if you ever try to use a touch screen with your fingernail, you'll find it doesn't work. You have to use the part that has blood vessels in it. So beaks don't generally work on COM-boards, and you have to teach them to touch it with their tongue. And that's a little tricky. There's a lot of good material on that in Parrot Kindergarten. Tablets are a lot of fun to do with birds. I will end with, again, pointing back to resources, Mickaboo and Parrot Kindergarten, which includes parrotkindergarten.com. And there are a couple of Facebook groups. Groups Reading Parrots is I believe the free one for Parrot Kindergarten. When you join Parrot Kindergarten, your membership gets you, access to a couple of other places. The Parrot Kindergarten site has got a number of free videos, as well as a pay-for curriculum, and these are just great resources. So thank you all for being here, for listening, and I hope you and your birds take something away. Back to you, Pam and Sarah.
Hey, Jonathan, thank you very much for that presentation.